really tired. Hello and welcome to Around the Nation. It is Monday. We've got a great show, jam-packed full of lots and lots of stuff. It's going to be a fantastic show. We've got Iran. We've got Martin Luther King Day. We've got some rather disastrous politics to go to, and lots more. So make sure to stick around. I am, of course, Jeff Waldorf, and this is Around the Nation. Now, we're going to start out with a little bit of news on Iran. So a little bit of good news when it comes to Iran. A recent report that was leaked to Reuters was a report by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, this report had actually said that Iran is actually making good on its promises to eliminate its nuclear capability as far as weaponizing their nuclear stockpile. So that's good. I mean, that's obviously a lot of good news. Now, it's been diluting its stockpile of uranium enriched to about 20%, and like I said, they've been diluting it so that nobody can actually use it for weapons grade material, because you need to be at least get it to 20% before it gets even remotely close to being enriched enough to use as a weapon. So great news. Now, according to Reuters, the IAEA report to member states said that, quote, the agency confirms that as of 20 January 2014, Iran has ceased enriching uranium above 5% U-235. Now, that's at several plants. That would be at Natanz and Fordo. So those were two of the plants that were contested that we really wanted to see stop. We wanted to see them stop enriching uranium at these two sites, and that was part of the deal that was made with Secretary Kerry earlier. So, like I said, this is a really good start when it comes to the peace process. Now, there's also some good news about the Arak plant. Now, the concern about the Arak plant is that they were going to enrich plutonium that could also be used as a weapon. Obviously, that would be a disaster. But luckily, of course, we negotiated that, and they have agreed to not actually continue to build that plant because it was under construction. Now, of course, hold on. Now, according to the Reuters report, actually, that the inspectors will actually double their presence as of after today when it comes to their inspections. So this deal, Iran is actually acting in good faith. They really want this deal because it means that we could ease some of the sanctions. Now, there's a bad side to this, and that bad side is that Congress can really fuck it up. Let me explain. Now, Bob Menendez was the Foreign Relations Committee chairman. He's actually been pushing legislation, it was probably last week, that wanted to push more sanctions on Iran, even after this deal went through. Now, this deal is supposed to pave the way for us to actually ease sanctions a little bit. So, obviously, this could be a bit of a disaster if this goes through. And surprisingly enough, a lot of Democrats are lining up and saying, yeah, we will support more sanctions on Iran, especially during this really, really tense time of negotiation, as well as Iran actually doing its part for this deal in order for us to ease some of the sanctions. So this can derail the whole thing. Now, there's a large group of senators, 59 included, but I've got some of the Democrats that have signed on. That's Senator Mark Begich, Richard Blumenthal, Ben Cardin, Bob Casey, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kay Hagan, Mary Landrieu, Joe Manchin, Mark Pryor, and, of course, Chuck Schumer. Now, all of these senators, of course, are being backed by AIPAC, so you kind of wonder, or I should say you kind of really don't have to wonder why they've taken this stance. Now, obviously, this would be a disaster because this could lead us towards war. Now, if it's one thing that we don't want, is we don't want to go to war with Iran. And Iran certainly does not want that. That's why they agreed to the deal in the first place. Now, I happen to be a bit of a believer in diplomacy because talking to people, sometimes it actually works. And this is a really, really tense time because, I mean, we don't want a nuclear Iran. Nobody wants a nuclear Iran. Okay? But we've got a chance at diplomacy, and we've been taking that road. But if these AIPAC-backed idiots come back and screw this thing up, it's not going to be good. Like I said, nobody wants to go to war with Iran unless, of course, you're Israel. Israel can't wait to jump in it. And I have no idea why. Now, this bill, actually, that was pushed by Senate Democrats to increase sanctions, also says that, if Israel decides to strike at Iran's nuclear facilities, and Iran decides to strike back, then America would instantly be at its defense. And then there goes the neighborhood. We don't want that. We do not want war. And, there was actually one Democratic senator that I forgot to mention in this list, and that's New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. Cory Booker, Mark Begich, Kirsten Gillibrand, Joe Manchin, we do not want to fight Iran. We do not want to go to war, especially when there's an option not to. So stop being idiots and believe in the diplomatic process. War should be a last resort. Okay? War should be an absolute last resort. And so far, I mean, look, these talks, this deal, will lead to more talks. Now, hopefully those will be just as productive as these, so that we can actually get a non-nuclear Iran through talking instead of trying to blow them up. I actually believe that you can actually get things done if you use diplomacy. So please, remember, use diplomacy. See where it goes. All right. So there's your update on Iran. Now, just go on to the next story here. Now, of course, today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Now, he would have actually been 85 years old if he had not been assassinated in Memphis in 1986. Or, I'm sorry, 1968. His actual birthday actually falls on January 15th. But this holiday, of course, isn't quite a celebration of his birth, but more of a celebration of the ideas and things that he stood for. At least that's my interpretation. Now, what some people really don't know about Martin Luther King is that when he was in Memphis before his assassination, he was there because he wanted to support public workers, public sanitation workers especially. Now, these sanitation workers were striking for higher wages and better treatment. Sounds kind of familiar. Don't we have something going on like that right now? Now, as I mentioned, this fundamental fight is still going on. I mean, you go out there and you look at Walmart strikers and you look at the fast food strikers. They're fighting for exactly the same things that those sanitation workers were fighting for when Martin Luther King had visited them in Memphis and was planning to strike with them. Now, while Martin Luther King Jr. was known for his civil rights activism, a lot of people should also recognize him more for challenging the excesses of unregulated free market capitalism, as well as worker rights, and of course, his main theme of economic justice. Now, the idea of economic justice was really been reflected in one of his speeches in 1967 that was titled, "Where Do We Go From Here?" Now, I'm going to give you a little bit excerpt of this speech. I wish I had it on video, but I couldn't find anything. Quote, "There are 40 million poor people here. And one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising a question about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole of society." Now, of course, that enough is more than enough to get you in trouble. Especially, that's enough to get you branded a communist here in America, especially, even back then, but especially now. But he continues, "Who owns the oil? You begin to ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that's 2/3 water? These are words that must be said." Man, the right wing of today would tear them apart, and even the left wing, but I'll get to that later. But he also said in this speech, quote, "Now don't think you have me in a bind today. I'm not talking about communism. What I'm talking about is far beyond communism." Now this is really important. My inspiration didn't come from Karl Marx. My inspiration didn't come from Engels. My inspiration didn't come from Trotsky. My inspiration didn't come from Lenin. What I'm saying to you this morning is communism forgets that life is individual. But capitalism forgets that life is social. And the kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis. It is found in a higher synthesis that combines the truths of both. Now, when I say questioning the whole society, it means ultimately coming to see that the problem of racism, the problem of economic exploitation, and the problem of war are all tied together. These are the triple evils that are interrelated. Now, the same issues that he covered in his speech are the same ones that we face today. The issues of economic inequality, worker exploitation, and endless war. And of course, we don't really have anybody today that's taken up the mantle of Dr. King against those things. Now, President Obama, in one of his recent speeches, claims to be focusing or going to focus on economic inequality. Now, based on his performance of the last 5 years, I'm not quite buying it. His policies are quite centrist, and some are even more to the right of centrist. There's also Pope Francis, but I don't think he counts either, as he may be talking about a lot of these issues, but there's not a whole lot he can really do. Now, as far as Dr. King goes, I think that if he were still alive, like I mentioned before, he would be called a radical communist socialist and would be 100% vilified, even by the Democrats. But you see, in these days, we actually need a form of radicalism. We need that because of how far we've drifted off one way. We need something to bring us back towards the middle. Remember when he was speaking of synthesis? There are good ideas on both sides. Good ideas that we can take. But we need something radical to take us back to the center. To take us back away from the extreme right wing that we have become today. Now, that said, there's a few things that I disagreed with Dr. King about. I'm not a Christian, for one. And religion played a huge role in Dr. King's life and his teachings. There's also his views on things like reparations for African American descendants of slaves. Now, I don't agree with that because I think that would do more harm than good. And I'm even sort of torn on affirmative action because I think that the effect, while well-intentioned and good-intentioned, might be doing more harm than good when it comes to race relations. But nonetheless, I see where these things came from, and it comes from a good place. Now, there's another thing that I wanted to mention. It's the politics. Now, there's a constant attempt by both parties to claim Martin Luther King, to claim his legacy. Yeah, he's one of us. He was a Democrat. No, he was a Republican. Both sides are trying to do it. Both parties want to claim to be the party that stood up for Martin Luther King's values. But let me tell you, the modern Democrats, not even close. But Republicans, that's even more laughable. The Republicans don't stand at all for any of King's values. I would say King would be more on the Christian left. Now, I talk a lot about the I talk to a member of the Christian left a lot on my other show, TYT Community. And the Christian left definitely holds a lot more of King's values than the radical right. But nonetheless, they still try. And let me show you. Let me show you a good example. That is an actual billboard. I'm not kidding. Martin Luther King was not a Republican. And let me show you why. To be 100% honest, Martin Luther King wasn't a member of either party. And he actually said, quote, "I don't think the Republican Party is a party full of the Almighty God, nor is the Democratic Party. They both have weaknesses, and I'm not inextricably bound to either party." Now, that said, he had no love for Republicans, of course, when he had said, quote, "The Republican Party geared its appeal and program to racism, reaction, and extremism. All people of goodwill viewed with alarm and concern the frenzied wedding at the Cow Palace of the KKK with the radical right. Definitely not a Republican. And I think today that sort of that description still sort of fits the Republican Party, the extreme Republican Party of today. Do you think that there are very, very few moderates left in that party? Now, so what about Reagan? Now, Ronald Reagan is the saint of all current Republicans. Well, he didn't exactly like Reagan either. This is why he's not a Republican. Quote, when a Hollywood performer lacking distinction even as an actor can become a leading war hawk candidate for the presidency, only the irrationalities induced by a war psychosis can explain such a melancholy turn of events. Not exactly friendly with Reagan either. But he also hit Democrat Lyndon Johnson over the war in Vietnam. And so that's what really brings me. He was quite anti-war. And so that's why I think that if he were around today, he would be protesting President Obama as well. He definitely wouldn't be happy with Obama on Afghanistan or Libya, or not to mention the drone strikes in Yemen and Pakistan, or even the use of mass surveillance on the American public, as revealed by Edward Snowden. And remember, I think that Martin Luther King would be especially angry about that mass surveillance, as he himself was put under mass surveillance by the FBI. The FBI bugged his house, tapped his phone. J. Edgar Hoover had him followed like a hawk because J. Edgar Hoover did not like Martin Luther King. He was very threatened by him. Now, there's a recent book by journalist Betty Megzer that actually wrote about this. And from her book, she said, quote, or she wrote, Hoover's attitude towards King can be described as a nearly savage hatred. The plot involved office break-ins, use of informers, mail opening, wiretapping, and the bugging of King's office, home, and hotel rooms. And there was even an anonymous note sent by government agents out there to discredit King. Now, Martin Luther King, through all this surveillance, they found out that he was having some extramarital affairs. Not so good. Now, this note said, quote, you know you were a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. White people in this country have enough frauds of their own, but I'm sure they don't have one at this time anywhere near your equal. You're no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. It gets worse. This note actually tried to compel Dr. King to suicide. Get this. Quote, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. Edgar Hoover did not like this guy. So, and like I said, he would be no friend of the mass surveillance going on today. And so he would be no friend to the Democrats either. I have a feeling that even today, Dr. King would still be unaligned politically. But I do wonder, though, if King had been alive, if he had survived the shooting, if we might have actually made more social progress instead of going backwards. And that's something that we can only guess. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back. I've got another great story of income inequality. Stay with me. Welcome back and around the nation. I just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who's joining us in the chat today, including a good friend, Dan Spearin from Truth Mashup. What's up, Dan? You made a really good point when you were talking about the whitewashing of Nelson Mandela. And, of course, they're trying to do it to Dr. King. It wouldn't surprise me. Both parties trying to take advantage of somebody who's dead. Where have we seen that before? It's not really a huge surprise. Now, I want to get on to our next story. And that is about some inequality. Income inequality worldwide. Now, there's a new report from a group called Oxfam that had basically warns that the richest 85 people across the globe share a combined wealth of $11 trillion. Now, how much is that basically of a share of income across the entire world? Well, those 85 people have as much money as the poorest 3.5 billion people in the world's population. That is horrible. Look, and people tell me, no, income inequality, it's just an invention of the leftists. No, income inequality exists. This is proof of that. 85 people, less than 100, have more wealth than 3.5 billion people. There's something wrong with that. And this report from Oxfam actually says that, hey, this isn't an accident. This was by design. They said, quote, this is driven by a power grab of wealthy elites who have co-opted the political process to rig the rules of the economic system in their favor. No shit. That is exactly what's going on. Now, I want to point out some of the worrying trends that they had pointed out in this study. And of course, they said that almost half of the world's wealth is now just owned by 1% of the population. The wealth of that 1% amounts to 110 trillion. That is 65 times the total wealth of the bottom half. Not only that, 7 out of 10 people live in countries where economic equality has increased in the last 30 years. Now, what happened about 30 years ago? I seem to recall that there was, we were pretty close to a new day in America. Maybe that's what happened. The Republican Party decided that they would no longer serve the people, that they would serve the corporations above all. Some more disturbing statistics from this. 7 out of 10 people, the richest 1% increased their share of income in 24 out of 26 countries for the years between 1980 and 2012. And this is a statistic I like to bring up a lot when it comes to the recovery. In the United States, the wealthiest 1% captured 95% of the income gains in the recovery, while the bottom 90% lost. They lost income. And this has real ramifications. But before I get into those, I've got some more disappointing statistics. 13 Americans made more money from their investments in 2013 than the entire SNAP budget. Wow. And look, that's what's so amazing about this, is that we're having a conversation on whether or not we should cut SNAP by a lot, by 39 billion, or 7 billion, or 4 billion. We're having a conversation about SNAP when you have 13 Americans that made more from investment income that is taxed, not at the regular rate, but taxed at half, half of the regular rate for everyone else. No, they made more money from that investment income than the entire budget that goes to feed 47 million people. Here's another disturbing fact. The richest 400% took in $300 billion in 2013. You know how much that is? That is the entire safety net. Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, the entire social safety net. 400 families took that much. Well, we're broke, guys. We're gonna have to cut. We're gonna have to cut your food stamps. We're broke. No, we're not broke. So the money's there. And get this. Here's another one. The richest 12,000 families are estimated to have each made $40 million just in the past year. Each. $40 million. And here's something that's even more disturbing. The richest 400 individuals actually own more than 3/5 of America. That's $2 trillion. 2.8% of the country's entire wealth. And this is more than the holding of 3/5 of America, or 72 million families. 400 people. But no, guys, we don't have a problem with income inequality. It's just a liberal fallacy. It's just a way to try and tax us more. Yes, that's it. Tax us more. It's ridiculous. Now, getting back to the Oxfam study. The Oxfam study had a couple of recommendations to try and fix some of this income inequality. Now, obviously, they're not going to be all that popular. They said that they should work to having a global goal to end extreme economic inequality in every country. Now, they want this to be basically a goal from 2015 on. They also want stronger regulation of markets to promote sustainable and equitable growth. Well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen when the corporations actually control the government, which is what we have now. And they also suggest that they should curb the power of the rich to influence political processes and policies that best suit their interests. Well, I've actually got a cure for that. I know exactly where you can go. You can go to wolf-pack.com. Become part of the solution. Get the money out of politics. Maybe then we can do all these other things. But there's more. They make more suggestions. They want to crack down on financial secrecy and tax dodging. You know, we're losing a lot of revenue from corporations and wealthy individuals putting their money in the Cayman Islands. I mean, there's enough holes in our tax system to drive a truck through. We can close those loopholes. We can do something about that. We just need the political will. As I reported before, we don't have the political will because, well, for one, Congress, half of Congress is worth over $1 million. And they always vote with their class. They always vote with the wealthy. So, the only other solution, of course, is to get money out of politics. It continues. Investment in universal access to healthcare and education. Well, we're trying that here, but it's not exactly working very well with Obamacare because they continue to try and kill it. And public option, forget about it. That never even had a chance here in America. In education, you see what's happening to our education system. We're continuing to cut, we're continuing to roll back, and we're doing a lot of things wrong. Focusing mainly on how to create mindless automaton workers to work in jobs that don't exist anymore. That needs some major overhauls before we can be competitive again in education. Another of their suggestions is progressive taxation. Once again, we don't have a lot of that. Our system is supposed to be a progressive system, but it's not. Like I mentioned before, it's got so many loopholes, deductions, where the wealthy actually pay less than regular people, than the middle class. And of course, they're strengthening wage floors, like, for example, raising the minimum wage to at least 10.10, which is one of President Obama's policy priorities, and strengthening workers' rights, which have continuously been under assault. We're doing everything wrong to fight income inequality. We're strengthening that inequality. We're going the complete wrong way. And finally, of course, removing the barriers to equal rights and opportunities for women. Women make up half of our population, and they make up a very significant chunk of our workforce. Why is it that women are paid less, 70 cents on the dollar, than men for the same job? Now, we're doing everything wrong. And you wonder why we have so much income inequality. And you wonder why it's such a problem. You wonder why the middle class has absolutely stagnated. And you wonder why we continue to get into more debt and deficits, because we cannot afford to do what we're doing because we're not bringing in enough money. We don't have that middle class there to pay taxes. We're doing it wrong, guys. We're doing it wrong. We need to change the system. And the first thing to do is to get the money out of the political process. That is the only way we're ever going to see any sort of reform on this issue. For anybody who's trying to wonder what the problem really is with our system, I just got to point to that graphic and say, it's the inequality, stupid. And take a quick break. We'll be right back. Round the Nation. All right, welcome back to Around the Nation. Just getting some, reading through some of the comments in the chat room. No, I am not wearing shoulder pads. I just have naturally big shoulders. Just to answer that question, thank you, Megalith Doomslayer, for asking. If you guys have any questions in the live stream, make sure to let me know. Post them. I will read them between breaks. So, just to let you know. So, if you catch me live, you can always ask questions. All right. So now we're going to move on to one of our next stories. This should be disastrous. And it has to do, of course, with a guy named Boyd Marcus. Now Boyd Marcus made some recent headlines in Virginia when he started to support Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. Now, what's sort of surprising about this is that Boyd was actually a longtime Republican, and he would always supported Republican candidates. So when he ditched the Republican Party, basically turning their back on them in order to support McAuliffe, Democrats were really surprised. Oh, this is great effort of bipartisanship. Oh, we're turning away from the crazy Tea Party. Well, it turns out that no, that is not why he turned. He did not want to spurn the Tea Party. He didn't think that they were too extreme. In fact, they thought that McDonnell was a little too cheap. Let me get into it. Now, Thursday, we find out from an email exchange that was made public, showed that 16 days before announcing that he was going to back Terry McAuliffe, Boyd Marcus had actually offered to work for Cuccinelli if Cuccinelli paid him somewhere in the range of $75,000 to $100,000. So Marcus was not trying to obviously try to be bipartisan, nor did he care about the Tea Party. He wanted to get paid. That's exactly what this was about. Now, Cuccinelli's campaign, of course, turned him down. Said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay you to be a consultant. You're a Republican. You're supposed to support me. So when Cuccinelli turned him down, he made an offer to, his firm actually received $40,000 in consulting fees from the McAuliffe campaign. Big surprise. And that was only the start. So he actually got $40,000 in 4 payments from September to November. And that's according to disclosure statements from Virginia. But like I said, that was only a down payment for Marcus turning over. Now, Marcus had actually received for this and was promised and received an appointment to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. You see where this is going here? Little tit for tat here going on in our politics. It shouldn't be surprising. But the reason that he had asked for this Alcohol Beverage Control Board post was because of how much it paid. It had an annual salary of $124,000 to $136,000 a year. Pretty plum post. Of course. And this is how politics is played. And of course, it's payoff. Big payoff. Now, this is kind of a scandal for the McAuliffe campaign, which ran on sort of, cleaning themselves up, especially after Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, who was plagued by scandal, essentially, for gifts and things. Well, it turns out Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, wasn't doing much better. Republicans, of course, are pissed about this, essentially saying that, well, Boyd Marcus stabbed us in the back, so of course we're going to out him and get him in trouble. And this controversy essentially just confirms the worst perception that people have about politics. Now, if you watch the show a lot, or if you watch the Young Turks, you know that the money controls the politics. It's all about the money. So when I read this story, I wasn't really surprised. But nonetheless, stories like this need to get out there. Because there are people in Virginia right now that are stunned that this would happen. They shouldn't be. They should know that in this system, it is pay to play. In this system, your gifts and your appointments always go to the highest bidder. It always goes to the highest bidder. Get the money out of politics. Once again, you got to get the money out of politics. All right, one last story for you, real quick, and it's about a district judge. Now, there's a former district judge named Richard Siebel who apparently was sending some rather distressing emails, disturbing emails from his professional public account. Okay, from his federal account. This wasn't just him on his home account. Now, what kind of emails was he sending? Well, he was sending emails to personal, professional colleagues, according to the AP, that showed disdain for blacks, Indians, Hispanics, women, certain religious faiths, liberal political leaders, and not only that, but some emails actually contained inappropriate jokes about sexual orientation. Pretty much gay people. Oh boy. Now, this was an investigation done by, of course, the Judicial Council of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, many of these emails, and it gets worse, many of these emails actually were related to pending issues that could have came before him, such as immigration, gun control, civil rights, health care, and the environment. All of those issues could have came before him. Do you think that he would have ruled impartially based on those types of emails? No, absolutely not. As far as I know, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals is actually quite a conservative court. But nonetheless, the 9th Circuit Court Council decided they would issue Siebel a public reprimand, and they ordered that he take no more new cases for 180 days and ordered him to complete training on judicial ethics, racial awareness, and elimination of bias. And they also ordered him to apologize. So what did he do? He resigned. He is no longer on the Court of Appeals, and this happened in March 29th, and that's 2 weeks after the council issued its order. This is not the type of guy, and it's good that he's gone, because this is not the type of guy that you want hearing your case. You think this guy's going to be partial? No. This guy was a George W. Bush appointee, so that kind of explains why he's a flaming douche. Now, what makes this really egregious is not just the emails themselves, but using the just the fact that this guy was so it's hard to find words to really describe what I think of this guy. It's really hard for me to think of words because there are so many bad ones in my head. But just the way that he views people that are different than him. Do you think that he would be impartial whatsoever? Absolutely not. Now that's a surprise because according to the investigation, and let's be fair, there was no evidence of bias in his rulings or sentences. And that's according to this investigation. And the witnesses generally regarded him as a good and honest trial lawyer and an esteemed judge. I don't know if I'm buying that quite, maybe. But I still don't think that that's a guy that I would like to be a judge. And so for this story, on that claim alone, I'm seeing bull. All right. That's all I got for you today. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Around the Nation. We'll be back on Wednesday A little bit of a schedule change for you. I'll be doing this show Monday, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Just that extra day gives me time to really work on getting the show to look better, work on the graphics, make sure that I've got enough time to do other things. Since I do, I do manage the TYT Nation channel as well. So if you guys got videos, send in your clips. I'll post them up on youtube.com/TYT Nation. I do that, so that extra day gives me a lot of extra time to be able to do that. So make sure to tune in Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 6 for the next episode of Around the Nation. And make sure to catch our shows on Thursday and Fridays, TYT Community and TYT Community Social Justice Hour. I want to thank you guys once again for watching. Big shout out to everybody on the live stream. Dan, I'm talking to you. Megalith Doomslayer, thank you for watching. Jagos, you guys are great. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll see you on Wednesday. I'm used to saying tomorrow. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Make sure to support our Patreon campaign, patreon.com/TYT Nation. And thank you all. We'll see you later.